Hey everyone, today we're diving into Creature Commandos, the upcoming DC animated series. If you're wondering who the heck are the Creature Commandos, or why did James Gunn choose this squad of misfit monsters to kick off his DC universe, then stick around. I've got all the details. And don't forget to subscribe and join us on Discord. I'll put that link in the description. So let's start with the latest updates. Creature Commandos is going to be a 7-episode series, animated, but it's an adult animated, a hard R, they say. It's going to premiere on Max on December 5th this year. Then it's going to be, you can't binge it. They're going to do like an episode a week. It's important to remember, this is not just any show. This is the very first entry in the very first phase of James Gunn's DC universe, Gods and Monsters. And he's not just running things behind the scenes, he's going to be writing it. So we can expect this to bridge the gap between animated and live action storytelling in a way that will be pretty new for the DC universe. Now, who exactly are the Creature Commandos? If you're unfamiliar with this team of weirdos, it might sound like an unusual place to start, but actually, if you are familiar with them, it probably sounds even weirder. But that may be what makes it so exciting. The original Creature Commandos debuted in 1980 in Weird War Tales number 93, and they introduced a squad of classic horror monsters, your Frankenstein's monster, your vampire type scary creatures. And they were recruited, really more like drafted, by the U.S. government for covert World War II missions. Then, so there was this Lieutenant Matthew Shreve, who was a normal guy, but also a huge jerk. Then there was this timid country bumpkin guy who could turn into a vicious werewolf. So, he's like kind of shy. And then all of a sudden he wants to eat everybody's neck. Speaking of eating necks, there's Sergeant Velcro, who was a bloodthirsty vampire, had to drink human blood. So they'd dump him off behind enemy lines and just, let him have a snack. Then there was the saddest one, which was Lucky, who was basically a Frankenstein's monster. At the beginning, he didn't even have vocal cords. Then they gave him some, and he could kind of just like make these sad guttural sounds. But he was like the most emotional one. He stepped on a mine or something and blew up, and they just pieced him back together. Velcro, the vampire guy, he was gonna spend 30 years in the brig, and he didn't want to do that. So instead, he let him pump him full of vampire bat blood, which, as anybody with any basic science background understands, will turn you into a vampire, of course. But the thing about it that always struck me when I was reading the original comic is that this guy Shreve is a jerk. He'll be talking to some beautiful lady who's helping them, and then he'll be like, don't mind these freaks, just making fun of him being totally awful. I've not read all the comics, but I really hope that the werewolf ate him at some point. Anyway, so it's basically Suicide Squad, but with classic monsters. There's a unique mix of horror, military action, kind of had some superhero vibes, even though everybody was not super heroic, other than, well, I wouldn't say Lucky's heroic exactly. He would be emotional when he did things. Like there was this one where they broke into this camp. It was a POW camp, and there was this one lady who apparently they were going to use her to create something bad, and she didn't want to create it, but they were sent there to kill her, and Lucky had to do it, and he's like crying, and he kills her. Really messed up. So one of the more unconventional teams in DC history, I would say even more so than the Suicide Squad, and I think even a harder one to really make work. So why did James Gunn, the guy who made Guardians of the Galaxy household names, choose Creature Commandos as his opening act? Clearly, he's a master at working with these strange misfit characters. Speaking of Guardians of the Galaxy, I think he kind of likes it. Like when he did the Suicide Squad, I read that he had the opportunity to have Superman be had them fight Superman. But instead, he had Starro be the villain because he said if he didn't put Starro in a movie, who would? that is the kind of thinking that I was hoping to get from him, with him running the DC universe. Like, let's have some interesting stuff. Let's not just churn out the same old. Like, Marvel movies, I feel like, are so cookie cutter. And I would love for these DC movies to be a little different. Nothing against the Marvel movies. I watch them and I like them. But I also like something a little different. So James Gunn will be dealing with these characters. They're rough around the edges, but I think he's going to be able to show us their heart. And that's one of the things that the original comic did well. It showed that even though they were bad, they all had they seemed to care for each other and care about the things they did, even if they did them anyway. Things that were wrong, I mean. So by starting the new DCU with Creature Commandos, I feel like Gunn is setting a definite, a bold tone. He's sending a message that this is not going to be just another cookie cutter set of franchises designed to sell toys. I think it will sell toys. I think that's kind of the thing that's sort of counterintuitive. You sit there and think, oh, I need to, we got to make this appeal to everybody so that we can sell a bunch of merch and license a ton of products. That may work. At the same time, though, you can just look at the Guardians of the Galaxy, look at the things that James Gunn has done, look at other times in comics and in movies, TV, whatever. There is a huge appetite for characters that are not just the same regurgitated thing over and over again. Like I said, this is a good sign. It's a good sign for DC. It's a good sign for us. And it's a good sign for comics and the whole comic book industry. In the early 2000s, Lucky and the gang, they were all replaced with new members. So this version is going to look a little different. Even those members were replaced, or at least rebooted during the New 52. There's new character, like just a straight up Frankenstein and his bride are now in there. And there's going to be clearly some reference to things the comics is going to pull from the root, from its comic origins. But there are definitely going to be some changes. Shreve will not be here. I'm not going to miss him. Instead of Shreve, it's going to be Rick Flag Sr. He may be just as bad as Shreve. And of course, we love to have somebody to hate in these kind of shows. So that'll be okay. He's going to be the team leader. Then there's going to be some new faces like Dr. Phosphorus, Weasel, who you probably remember from the Suicide Squad. And Gunn, he's writing it himself. So we've got the perfect person for the job. That's the guy you want in this seat. First of all, you know that he's the boss of everything, so there's nobody to hold him back, which in his case, I believe will be a good thing. You just look back to the fact that the extreme, total carte blanche that you could give somebody is saying look, you can have Superman. And when he was doing the Suicide Squad, he said, no, let's go with this weird starfish alien guy. So I don't think we've got to worry about him abusing his power. He has made a career of taking characters that people maybe don't connect with at first. Maybe they don't really think are their cup of tea. And he makes you realize, you know what? Maybe that cup of tea just needed some sugar. Or maybe a whole lot of sugar, But he can give it to you. He'll sugar it up. So I would not be surprised if we saw quite a few of these, or at least, 2 or 3 select characters become fan favorites. I'd expect to see a lot of heart, a lot of humor, a lot of quirkiness, which I enjoy. I don't want it in everything. I don't want a quirky Batman, but I like to have it's cool when you have an option of, hey, you know what I'm kind of in the mood for? Something kind of out there. Let's watch Creature Commandos. Bringing the team to life is going to be this studio that I'm not familiar with. It's called Bobby Pills. They're based in Paris. They say they're the only adult animation studio in Europe, I think, or something like that. But of course, that's probably marketing. They've done some interesting things. They've got a show that's coming up on Netflix. They've done some other adult animated stuff. Been around since 2017. They've done shows like Crisis Young, Vermin, and something called Friends. So hopefully their experience with mature themes and dynamic visuals will help them get this edgy, vibrant world going. I'm pretty sure they were involved in Invincible. And it definitely, if you look at the early art, it looks very reminiscent of that. It's not super interesting animation. To me, it's like serviceable animation. Like, I like the show Invincible, but that animation is just meh to me. And it's all DC animation in general, and probably Marvel. It's just like they've got this one very basic style, and it tells the story, but I almost like for my animation to look like as drawn as possible. And the same with comics. I like to know that there was an artist working on this. And you don't get that usually with anything animated in DC. Even the Doom that came to Gotham, I'm thinking, okay, Mike Mignola, let's see that. I loved the look of that comic. Now let's see how they bring it to the, what is it? It's not the silver screen, the small screen? Whatever. Say they bring it to TV, and they didn't. They just did the same thing they always do. So I'm not expecting anything super groundbreaking, but what I have seen is it looks good. It looks maybe even a little better than Invincible. There's just a little bit more of a boldness to it, a little more almost maybe darkness. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. And then as for the team, there's going to be Rick Flag Sr., and that's going to be Frank Grillo. And he was in The Purge. He was Crossbones in the MCU. And Rick Flag Sr., Rick Flag Jr.'s dad, he's a military dude. He's, going to be the boss. He's going to lead them on covert missions. And then you got Eric Frankenstein, and he's going to be voiced by the guy who plays Hopper in Stranger Things. And he was in the Hellboy reboot. I don't think it was his fault that it didn't really hit the mark. I definitely think he's got an interesting voice for Eric Frankenstein. Frankenstein is this, reanimated being, and he's very strong. He's very durable, and he's the key main guy in the Creature Commandos. Then you've got the bride, who's played by Indira Varma, who was Ilaria Sand in Game of Thrones. She was in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and she's playing basically a love interest of Frankenstein's monster with her own unique abilities. Then there's Dr. Phosphorus, who's going to be played by Alan Tudyk, who I'm very excited about. He's the guy from Firefly. He was in Rogue One. He's a really cool actor. He is playing a radioactive villain. Like, his whole makeup is radioactive, and he can emit heat. He can emit radiation. So he's a dangerous guy, and usually a villain. Then there's Nina Mazursky, who's a scientist who transformed herself into some sort of amphibian. She's going to be voiced by Zoe Chow, who was in a bunch of stuff that I've not seen. Then there is G.I. Robot and Weasel, who we already know, and that's going to be Sean Gunn, who played Kraglin in Guardians of the Galaxy, and Weasel in the Suicide Squad. G.I. Robot is a robot designed for war, and we all know Weasel. Finally, Amanda Waller. She'll be voiced by Viola Davis, as always. I don't think there's a better pick for that. And, if you kind of think about her ruthless tactics and the way that she operates, it sounds very reminiscent of Shreve. So there will definitely be some element of that. The last thing that I want to note is maybe the most exciting part, which is that while the series will stand on its own, it's not technically a standalone series. It's not like on an island. It will play some role in the larger DCU. James Gunn has said that some of the characters from the show will appear in whether it's other animated projects or even live action projects. Like Frank Grillo is going to be in Peacemaker for season 2. He's going to be in the new Superman movie. So there's this could be interesting to see how big and detailed and deep this universe can be if they're really working on doing this world building, putting together this really interconnected, vast continuity throughout multiple media. I am very, very excited to see how that goes. Now, will this work? I'm optimistic. It's going to need to nail that really unique blend of horror, action, and humor that you got in the original comic. But even the original comic didn't always get it right. But this has got to get it right. They got to have good storytelling. That's always the key to anything. I mean, sometimes great art or action or whatever, sometimes that'll keep things alive. It'll keep certain people interested. But if you want to get everybody on board and really have this thing be a hit, something that really has an impact on the larger DCU, you got to have great stories. You got to have great characters. And I mean, obviously, as I've said, James Gunn, I think, is the guy for that. And as long as the animation is as good as it looks like it will be, then I think James Gunn's on track to really have a big hit here. So that's the lowdown on Creature Commandos. It's an unconventional choice, but I like unconventional. Let me know if you're excited about this. Tell me in the comments. Join us on Discord. Everybody's been asking why you're not there. And I had to tell them, I was like, look, I mean, yes, they watch some stuff on YouTube, but that's in their life. They got other stuff that they're doing, and they get it. But they'd love to see you. So if you can, stop by, or at least leave a comment. Make sure you subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the stuff that's going on in the DC universe and beyond.